My daughter-in-law is not family, so she's in the way. With those words echoing, the car drove off, leaving me behind. Lost in unfamiliar mountains, on unknown terrain, I felt utterly bewildered, and Mason's funeral is about to start. A few days earlier, upon hearing the grave news about Mason, my husband and I rushed to his family's home. Everyone had been prepared for Mason's passing, since he had been in the hospital for some time. Rather than a sense of sorrow, it felt more like relief that Mason was finally free from pain. However, the funeral preparations were quite a challenge. My husband's family home, situated in the mountains, is the main branch of the family. They used to own vast lands in the past. Although the family's fortune was squandered by the grandfather's generation, their pride as the main family remained. During occasions like Christmas or family gatherings, many relatives would come, and I was always roped in to help. Given that Mason was the head of such a family, his funeral had to be grand. Sue, my mother-in-law, and Wyatt, my husband, and Grace, his sister, were all in a frenzy. Our family is the main branch. The funeral has to be grander than for Mason's younger brother.
Right, we're expecting about 100 attendees.
Maybe I should get a new pearl necklace for the occasion. While everyone voiced their own opinions, I, the daughter-in-law, was left to handle all the preparations.
Austin, ensure you discuss everything properly with the funeral home. You know it best.
Please make sure to choose the best altar and coffin. The catering after the viewing should be from that fancy restaurant. Their steak is delicious. Truth be told, due to family circumstances, I had worked at a funeral home before getting married. This seemed to be another reason the in-laws looked down upon me. I certainly know the ins and outs of funeral preparations, so I don't mind handling them. But it's frustrating that they push all the planning and communication with their relatives onto me, yet never miss an opportunity to voice their opinions. It's the worst. Upgrading the altar will cost an additional $1,200, and the coffin is $400 more. Is that okay? It's the daughter-in-law's duty to manage such things. Typically, the deceased's favorite dishes are served during the viewing. If the dishes look cheap, it'll be embarrassing.
Just do as you're told. With the gifts from all the attendees, we'll manage.
Reluctantly, I went ahead with the preparations to ensure a grand funeral to their satisfaction. Then came the day of the funeral. 4 of us got into the car my husband was driving from the in-laws' house. However, as we approached the mountain path, the car suddenly halted. Look, those wild lilies over there were Dad's favorites. Austin, could you pick some for us?
Huh? Where exactly?
Right there in the woods. Quickly go grab some. Though I couldn't see the flowers from inside the car, I thought I might spot them up close, so I stepped out. Just then, Mason had everything thought out and arranged for us. No sooner had Sue spoken than the car sped off. I stood there completely taken aback, watching it disappear. My name's Austin and I'm 42. In reality, due to personal reasons, I had dropped out of school and worked at a funeral home until I got married. I didn't dislike the job, but the erratic hours and scarce days off wore me out. It was around that time I met Wyatt, introduced by a friend. Wyatt was 6 years older than me and seemed very dependable. He told me it was okay if I wanted to quit my job, and that led us to get married. In hindsight, it might have been a way for me to escape my situation. Nevertheless, we've been married for 20 years now. Although we haven't had children, I believe we've managed fairly well with my kind-hearted husband. Well, except for the dealings with his family. His family was all about pride, being the main branch and showing off. Whenever there was a family gathering or a Christmas, they'd go all out with a feast to welcome the relatives. And all of that preparation fell on my shoulders. Neither Sue nor Grace, who lives with them, would lift a finger to help. They'd just sit and critique. I told my husband multiple times I didn't want to visit them. At our home he helps with chores, but at his family's he feels free of responsibilities, so he never refuses to go. On top of that, he'd act all macho only when we're at his family's place, like he's whipped. However, every time we returned home, he'd apologize profusely and try to make it up to me. Eventually, for the sake of our marriage, I decided to endure these visits, but only twice a year. But I never expected they'd dump the entire preparation for Mason's funeral on me.
Look, Austin, you've got to handle all of Dad's funeral.
What are you saying? I can help, but it's not all on me.
Why not? You worked at a funeral home, right? You know everything about it. We have no clue about funerals. Please handle it.
I reluctantly agreed, but that's when the nightmare began. The funeral home the hospital recommended has a bad reputation. Austin, can you find a better one?
That funeral venue looked old, didn't it? Change it to a nicer one.
White chrysanthemums are so gloomy. Pick something more vibrant. Every decision I made with the funeral director was criticized, forcing me to redo the arrangements repeatedly. In between, I had to contact all the relatives, arrange taxis for the elderly, and handle the return gifts. There was an endless list of tasks. Austin, I'm hungry. Can you hurry with the food? Anticipate our needs without us having to ask. Instead of grabbing a sandwich from the convenience store, they demanded meals from me. I'm swamped with funeral preparations. Wyatt, tell them to sort out their own meals. I finally asked my husband, but with the confidence from being home, he frowned at my request.
But you're the wife. You should handle meals.
Excuse me? Frustrated by his attitude and lack of support, I served them simple pasta. Wow, that's lazy. If you're serving pasta, you should add snacks.
Yeah, Mom's right.
Facing their unreasonable demands during Mason's funeral preparations, I realized arguing was a waste. I just did as told.
I hope you're arranging the funeral as we instructed.
The altar and coffin are top of the line. I finished contacting all the relatives and the return gifts already. No issues.
There better not be any mistakes.
Stop talking down to me, especially when you dump everything on me. After the viewing, my husband's attitude infuriated me, leading to a heated exchange. Mason appreciated me. He even called me before his death, thanking me for putting up with all your unreasonable demands. In my husband's family, only Mason treated me with kindness. Before he passed, he called just for me, saying,
"Thank you for all you've done. I'm sorry for the unreasonable demands everyone constantly makes. Anyway, you know funeral preparations better. Just get it done."
Is everything financially sound? After all, you've been demanding top-notch everything without checking prices.
Just do what you're told. If you keep arguing, we might as well divorce.
Taken aback by the sudden mention of divorce, I asked, "Are you serious?"
Absolutely. My mom always said I should have married someone better.
Excuse me?
My cousin, who recently got divorced and came back to the family, is stunningly beautiful. She even won a university beauty contest.
Wyatt told me.
At the viewing, my aunt kept pestering me about marrying her after divorcing you, Austin.
During the post-viewing dinner, while I was swamped with serving tea and cleaning up, Wyatt just sat there, sipping beer and chatting with relatives. I couldn't believe that was the topic of their conversation. As I fumed in silence, Wyatt's confidence grew. I kept telling myself to hold on just one more day until the funeral was over. The next day, we were on our way to the funeral in a car driven by my husband. But as we reached the mountain path, Sue demanded I pick lilies for Mason, and they left me stranded there. Usually my husband wouldn't pull a stunt like this, but there he was, smirking at me from the speeding car. He probably had that beautiful cousin he mentioned yesterday on his mind. At this point, whatever, I've done all I could for the funeral. The funeral service will handle the rest. Although being left was quite shocking, there was a slight relief in knowing I didn't have to oblige to the family's every whim anymore. My real issue now? How to navigate this mountain path in my funeral attire and heels. How am I supposed to make my way through this? Exasperated, I sat down by the road. That's when a car stopped in front of me. Hours passed and the funeral was nearing its end.
Hey, where the hell are you, Austin?
I received a frantic call from my husband. What's this about an $800,000 funeral bill? You better get here now! I could hear Sue, her voice almost a shriek in the background. Serves you right. I had to stifle my laughter hearing their predictable reaction.
What's going on? There's no way we can afford an $800,000 funeral.
Wasn't the plan for the gifts from the attendees to cover the funeral costs?
The expected money didn't come through. Plus, only half of the expected guests showed up.
Well, that figures. Gift amounts for funerals in this area range from $30 to $50. For close relatives like parents or siblings, gifts could range from $100 to even $1,000. But knowing how stingy some of our relatives can be, they'd probably give around $30 each. If 100 people each gave $30, that would only total $3,000. Furthermore, many of our relatives are elderly, and a good number of them wouldn't be able to attend the funeral. You should have seen this coming.
Why didn't you tell us?
I did, several times, but you all insisted on the most expensive options. As my husband was at a loss for words, Sue jumped in. Just get back here now. They plan to charge $300 if you were here, but without you, they're saying it's $800,000. What's going on? About that. When Sue told me to find a better funeral home, I was at my wit's end. So I reached out to the president of the funeral company I used to work at. He introduced me to a funeral home near our family home, and because of his influence, they agreed to do it at a much lower price. I had arranged a special price since I was involved, but since I'm not there, it can't be helped. Well then, you just need to come over now.
Please, just do something about it.
Well, I could come, but... As I talked on the phone, I revealed myself to them.
What? You're here.
Actually, when I was lost on that mountain road, the car that stopped was driven by the person in charge from the funeral company. We had met several times to discuss plans, and he was quite shocked to see me sitting on the roadside. Once I explained the situation, he kindly drove me to the funeral hall. I wanted to pay my respects to Mason, so I asked him to bring me here, but I didn't want to be around all of you, so I stayed hidden.
So, you were here after all.
We can reduce the funeral costs now. My husband and Sue were practically dancing with joy. That won't be happening. Why? Because according to you, I'm not a part of the family. Oh, come on. That was just a slip of the tongue.
You're overreacting. You're my wife.
I'm not anymore.
What do you mean?
You said you wanted a divorce, remember? You can go ahead and marry that beautiful, well-educated cousin of yours.
Look,
Before he could finish, Grace, who had been watching from nearby, lunged at me. Enough of your nonsense. Since you're here, we can get the funeral cost down to $300,000, right? No, I won't. And even if it's reduced, how do you plan on paying? We'll just withdraw it from my dad's bank account. He once mentioned he had about that much. That's not possible. Why not? When someone passes away, their bank accounts are frozen. You can't access the money. I heard if you don't inform the bank, it'll be fine. At Grace's comment, I couldn't help but smirk. Seeing my reaction, my husband panicked.
You didn't tell the bank, did you?
Of course I did. You told me to handle all the funeral matters, so I took the liberty to inform them as well.
So, what do we do now? Or were you planning on covering it all?
I wanted to say goodbye to Mason properly, which is why I had myself brought here. But since I didn't want to be around all of you, I stayed hidden. I then pulled out a bank book and showed it to them. The bank book I was holding was given to me by Mason just a bit before he passed away. Mason had apologized for the past rudeness of his family and told me,
since they'll probably have you handle all the funeral arrangements, please use this bank book to pay for the funeral expenses.
He handed me a bank book with $300,000 in it. That's why I had consulted with the funeral director to ensure the costs would be kept within $300,000. But surely you can't withdraw that money, they argued. Actually, I can. I responded confidently. This account was set up with me as a pre-designated agent. In today's aging society, some banks offer a service where a person other than the account holder, if previously assigned, can withdraw funds. Mason was always so thoughtful, planning even for times he wouldn't be here. I said, "Hand over that bank book," they demanded. I won't. Mason gave clear instructions. If you ever treated me so poorly, I was to take this money as a settlement and divorce. Mason once shared with me,
You know, I married into the family just like you, Austin. I truly understand how you feel.
He was brought into Sue's home, who was an only daughter, in order to keep the family legacy. Although the previous generation had squandered most of the family wealth, leaving only the house they lived in, Sue and the relatives would often look down on him and say, "You, as the son-in-law, should just stay quiet." That's why Mason always cared for me. When he gave me the bank book, even knowing he didn't have much time left, he was more concerned about my well-being than his own. But that's Mason's inheritance, right? Daughter-in-laws don't have any rights to inherit, she retorted. Don't worry, he had left a will with a lawyer and he told me it's clearly stated in there. I responded. The trio, unaware of my conversations with Mason, were stunned to learn about the existence of a will. Well, the funeral is done, so I'll take my leave. Just a heads up, Sue apparently spent most of Mason's savings. There's hardly anything left.
What?
Seeing my husband on the verge of collapsing, I decided to twist the knife a bit further. You know, I'm going to divorce you and sue for compensation in the divorce court for the way your family has treated me. If you refuse the divorce, be prepared. I'm willing to go to court. As I turned on my heel to leave, the voices of the three of them echoed behind me, calling out in desperation.
Don't say that. Austin, please wait.
Austin, I'm so sorry. Please come back. Please don't leave. I retorted, no way. Even if it comes down to $300,000, how are you going to pay it? To cover the $800,000 funeral cost, the family had to sell their home, their sole inheritance. But since it was located in a remote countryside, they struggled to find a buyer. When they finally managed to sell it, the proceeds barely covered their debts, leaving them with nothing. With nowhere left to go, Sue and Grace, having lost their home, reluctantly moved in with my husband. However, living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, he complained constantly, and my husband even emailed me about the daily struggles. After receiving dozens of emails from him begging, "Let's start over," I reached out to my trusted attorney and ensured there would be no further contact. I finally freed myself from the burdensome in-laws and my spineless husband, who was constantly swayed by Sue and Grace. Now I'm genuinely happy. Reconnecting with the funeral home's president during Mason's funeral arrangements led him to offer me a position, saying,
"Would you like to come back?"
I began working there again. Having been on the sending side during Mason's funeral, I believe I now understand the feelings of the grieving family better than in my younger, more passionate days. I'm hopeful that I can now offer funeral services that genuinely support and empathize with the bereaved families.